And now we're on to Daf Chof Vav Amud Beis, an exciting sugya which is going to give us a mysterious, no, not mysterious at all, an answer to a mysterious question that is, what is the origin of tefillahs? But before we get there, let's finish off this idea of what happens when you make an error in tefillah. What can you and can you not make up? Tanya Rabban at the top of Chof Vav Amud Beis. Tanya Rabban, we learned in the Brachos, Ta'a v'lo hispalel mincha. A person made an error and he didn't daven mincha when? Be'erev Shabbos. So this is even more problematic, because if he davens two tefillahs, he didn't daven a tefillah of choil, a mundane weekly tefillah, and you'll have to make it up by davening a tefillah which is holy of Shabbos. So what should he do? Answers the Brachos, mispalel belel Shabbos time. He should daven two Shabbos dika shmonesres. What happened the other way around? He forgot to daven mincha on Shabbos. What can he do? Because now he's missed out the tefillah of Shabbos. Can he make it up on Chol? Mispalel moitzi Shabbos time shel choil. He should daven to a Mr. Shabbos. So actually, you can even do this from Shabbos to Chol and Chol to Shabbos. I should have said the other way around, from Chol to Shabbos and Shabbos to Chol. Now, when you're saying Shemona Esrei Motzei Shabbos, you have to add into the bracha Atachoinen Tanu, which is called Havdalah. So the question is, when you're davening two Shemona Esrei to make up for the Mincha you missed, where do you put Atachoinen Tanu in, which is going to be your tefillah of Chol, the first or the second? Says the Brachos, Mavdil b'Rishono v'einu Mavdil b'Shniya. You put it in, you do the Havdalah, which is Atachoinen Tanu. You do that in the first one, you don't do that in the second one. So the second tefillah is what's called the Tashlumim, the make-up tefillah, and the first one is your actual tefillah for Ma'ariv. And if you actually switched it, and you did the Havdalah in the second one, and you didn't do in the first one, Shnia al Soloi, Rishon al Soloi. So the second one works for you, and the first one doesn't work for you, meaning that the second tefillah would be considered your tefillah, your normal weekday ma'ariv, and the first tefillah will be completely null and void, and you'd have to daven a third tefillah to make up for the tefillah you missed on Erev Shabbos. The Gemara asks, Kasha in part 2, L'meimer tekim to l'avdil b'kamaisa, command lo tzali dami, umahadrina nei. Is this to say that since you didn't make Havdalah Atachoinen Tanu in the first Shemona Esrei, it's as if you haven't davened at all, and we make you go back to the beginning? It's as if your tefillah is not tefillah very minu. If that's true, we have a contradiction, because it says if you made an error and you didn't remember you didn't say the power of the rain in the bracha of the revival of the dead, which is Mashiv Arocha Mirad Geshem V'Shayla B'Berachas Hashanim, and you didn't add into Mevarich Hashanim that bracha of Baruch Aleinu, it's a Shana Azois. You didn't add in the words for saying Tal Umata Livracha. What's the halacha? Machzirin Oisoi. We make you go back to the very beginning of the Shemona Esrei. But Havdalah b'choinen adas ein machzirin oisoi. But if you forgot and you left out Atachoinen Tanu on Saturday night, we don't make you go back because you're going to be able to say that on your glass of wine, so you'll be able to make up for Havdalah. So if you didn't say it, there's no problem. And if so, over here, granted, you forgot to say Havdalah in the first Shemona Esrei and you said in the second, but why should that invalidate that first Shemona Esrei for you? The Gemara says, Kasha, there's indeed a big problem. So it's that kind of, it's a teretz, but it's not a teretz. It's a teretz which says, I don't know. And the Gemara gives us, with this small little word, the permission to live with the kasha. Not every question requires an answer. In fact, sometimes giving an answer to an unanswered question is a disservice to the asker, because it closes down that quest for life. And we're going on to the second sugya in our page, and this sugya is going to take us all the way down to the bottom of the page. It's going to be the source of where are the tefillahs. The fact that we have three tefillahs, where do they come from? These three tefillahs that Jews daven around the world for thousands of years. What is the origin? Where do they come from? Itmar. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina Amar. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina says, Tfilois Avois Tiknun. Who made up the three statutory required services that we daven every day. So it says Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, it was the patriarchs. Rabbi Shimon Levi Amar Tfilas Kneged Tamidim Tiknum, whereas Rabbi Shimon Levi argues and he says that the tefillas were enacted in place of the korbanos, which is really chronologically a massive difference. If you say like Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, it means that the services existed from the times of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Whereas if you say according to Rabbi Shimon Levi, the services were only introduced in the time of the, after the Beis HaMikdash, in place of the Korbanos? Or do you say that according to Shimon Levi, no, they were always around because we had some kind of prophecy about the notion of what the Korbanos would be? It sounds very strange. It would be much more logical to say, I would say, of course this is going to be your research, that there would be a chronological gap between when the tefillahs actually began, according to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Shimon Levi. Let's see what they say. Tanya Kavas Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, Tanya Kavas Rabbi Shua ben Levi. The second part in our sugya is a brisa, one that supports Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, and the second one that supports Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Tanya Kavas Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, that's going to say to us that Avos invented tefillah. Avraham tikain tefillah shachris. It was Abraham that enacted the morning prayer. Because, and we actually use this in our Gemara early on in Vav Amud Beis to prove that you have to have a mokum kavod to your tefillah, and if you do, you become one of the Talmidim of Avraham Avinu. So it would be interesting to know, does Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, doesn't he hold of the idea that you have a mokum kavua, or he held that yes, he does agree that this pasuk can be used that Avraham davened, but he didn't enact the tefillah? Good question. So continues the Gemara and says, so when it says, and he went to the place where he stood, and we know that standing is a reference to praying, because we have the language of standing in relation to prayer in regard to Pinchas. It said he stood and he prayed. So we see that since it says Avraham Avinu went to the place where he stood and standing is praying, so we see that Avraham, and that was, by the way, in the morning, so we see that Avraham enacted tefillas shachritz. Yitzchak tikain tefillas mincha. Yitzchak was the one who invented tefillas mincha. Yitzchak lasuach basada. And Yitzchak went out to discuss, to talk in the field. Lifnois erev, towards the evening time. So this is mincha time. Ve'ein sicha ela tefillah, and sicha, this conversation. You went to have a conversation. This conversation is a reference to Shnema tefillah la'ani ki yatov, prayer to the poor person when he will enshroud himself and he'll cover himself over the garment. And in front of Hashem he will spill out his conversation, and that's a reference to prayer. So that proves that Yitzchak lasuach is also prayer, and that's how Yitzchak invented mincha. And Yaakov tikain tefillas arvis. How do I know that Yaakov invented Ma'ariv Shnema v'yivka b'makom v'olen sham? As the sun set, as we recall, Yaakov bumped into this place and he rested there. Now the word v'yivka, what does it mean? V'ein pegia ela tefillah. The word of he bumped into is actually a lotion of he prayed. As it says in the pasuk of Jeremiah, the prophet of Jeremiah, don't pray for this nation, and don't carry for them song and prayer, and don't tifgabi. So tifga means essentially don't pray for me. So therefore we see that the Avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov invented Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv, and that supports Rabbi Shimon Levi, and that's part 3 of our Gemara support to Rabbi Shimon Levi. Part 4 of our Gemara is a support to Rabbi Yossi. Part 3 of the Gemara is support to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. I may have mixed up the names earlier in order to make sure that you're focusing. And now we're on to Rabbi Shimon Levi. Rabbi Shimon Levi is the one that holds Keneged Korbanos Tiknum. The way I remember this, I thought I remembered it, is because it's Rabbi Shua ben Levi, and the Leviim were the people that brought the Korbanos. So the Tanya Kavas Rabbi Shua ben Levi, this is part 4 of the Gemara, support Rabbi Shua ben Levi. What is the reason why Chachamim said that Tfilas HaShachar stretches until midday? Because the morning the morning daily offering is offered and goes until Chatzos. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ad arba shois. Yari Tami Shachar Karav V'Hoilech ad arba shois. And Rabbi Yehuda argues not because he argues on Tefillah, but he argues on when the korban was brought. He says that the korban of the daily offering of Shachar was brought, of the morning was brought until 4 hours. And why did they say that Tefillas and Mincha goes all the way until night time? Because the evening daily offering can be brought up until the night. Rabbi Yehuda again will say ad plag mincha, because the evening daily offering is brought until a half of the mincha. We're going to soon discover what that is. And why do we say that Tefillas Erev doesn't have a specific time? It's the entire night. Because the limbs and the fats, the limbs of a korban oil and the fats of all the korbanos, of all the offerings that were not consumed mi be'erev from the day, craving milchim kol halayla can be offered up the entire night. And why do we say that the korban musaf can be the prayer of musaf can be brought, can be offered, can be prayed the entire day? Because the musaf korban can be brought the entire day. Rabbi Yehuda says no, korban musaf is only until 7 hours. Because on this Rabbi Yehuda agrees. Rabbi Yehuda argues and says that the korban musaf has only got 7 hours in the day to be brought, and hence the prayer of musaf can only go 7 hours long. And now the Brachos adds on, mincha gedola, and when is mincha, what's considered mincha gedola, which is a starting point when you can start bringing the korban of bein arbaim, the evening korban, from 6 hours and a half and further. Mincha ketana, and what's considered small mincha, that's the best time to bring the korban tamid. The first time you can bring it is from 6.5 hours, and the best time is from 9.5 hours into the day. Now the Gemara part 5 says, Iboilu, Rabbi Yehuda plag mincha kama ka'amar u plag mincha achreinu ka'amar. When Rabbi Yehuda was saying that you have to have half mincha, which part of the mincha was he referring to? In other words, you take the 2.5 hours that remain in the day from 9.5 hours, which is the beginning of Mincha Ketana, and you say, well, did he mean the first 1.25 hours after 9.5 hours, or the second, which is essentially 1.25 hours before nightfall? Which one was he referring to? Tashma, we have an answer given in a Brachos. Rabbi Yehuda Omer plaga mincha achreinu amru v'hiyud alef shois chaser revia. Rabbi Yehuda says explicitly that he's referring to the second half of the period of time from 9.5 hours onwards, and that's going to be 11 hours less a quarter. So 10.75 hour, or another way of saying it, is 1.25 hours before nightfall. The Gemara says, so seemingly this brisa is not only a support to Reb Shua ben Levi that we established the prayers in order to coincide and in place of the korbanos, or at least parallel to the korbanos. But from the time gaps it shows, which is really what our Mishnah says, that it needs to be this way, and therefore how does Rabbi Chanina defend himself? It clearly suggests that it's going to be a problem with the Avos being the originators of Tefillah, which really I don't understand, because it's not really a tiyuvta to Rabbi Chanina. He had a brisa to support him, so it's all those time as well. But I'm going to go with this Gemara, and you're going to solve the problem. Really, I'll say to you, for sure, the originators of the Tefillahs who enacted them were the patriarchs. And the Rabbanan relied those pre-existing tefillahs on the korbanos. It's not because the beginning of the enactment was with the korbanos. There was just they once they already had the tefillahs, they then made them parallel to the korbanos. And then he brings a proof, because if you don't say this, tefillas musaf Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Chanina man tikna, even according to, in other words, if you don't say this teretz on behalf of Rabbi Chanina, so then where does musaf come from? there's no Av that was Metakim Musaf. El Tfilas I was Tiknum Masmachin Rabban Karbonis. Therefore, of course, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina will say that Tfilas were enacted by the forefathers, but they were actually then parallel to the Karbonis later on in order to make that kind of overlap. There's enormous amounts to kind of think about in the sugya of Tfilas, but we'll stop now for the moment and wait excitedly continue on to Chofetzai Amud Aleph. Stay tuned for more Geschmack.